Welcome to UCF Knightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Phegley coming to you from the 1148 studios. This is episode number 60 of the UCF Knightline podcast, and by my side is
Trylko. Hello, everyone. Congratulations on 60. I know you like the ones that end in 5 and the ones that end in 0.
Absolutely. 60 is a milestone. They're all milestones when they end with a 0 because it's 10 more that you've done.
Another milestone this week, UCF did not lose.
I know. That's awesome.
It's great.
It was a bye week, so how could you lose on a bye week? Yeah, but whatever. I'll take not losing, so we don't have to talk about losing a football game.
We don't have to break down a loss.
Yeah, we can talk about some other stuff. And
there is still a lot of stuff to discuss.
Absolutely.
News breaking, we're going to get to in a second about, looks like the new athletic director hire is imminent. I think our listeners are going to be interested. We've got a insider from the University of Buffalo up in New York. So what? Well, it's possible that the next AD at UCF will come from Buffalo, and the insights that he gives on his itchy trigger finger when it comes to hiring, or firing, I guess, and some of the branding things with regards to Buffalo, I think are very interesting, possibly in the UCF universe, and he's going to join us.
Yeah, that'll be interesting, and also we have Eric Lopez coming up, and he has all kinds of insight into all kinds of UCF stuff and, does a radio show. He is the announcer for, or calls the softball games on the radio. And,
And he had you on his show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so, he's a good guy, and so we decided to have him on this week where we didn't have a game to talk about, so we could talk about all kinds of other stuff. There was basketball this week. Lost that game. Not too bad, though. I mean, played Davidson. It could have been a lot worse. It was a lot worse last year.
Going to be a busy week out at UCF with midweek football game, basketball home opener, volleyball season ender. A lot of reasons to go out to the University of Central Florida this week to catch a sporting event.
I'm excited about the football game on Thursday night. I think that this is going to be one of our best chances this year to win a game. Last year it was really exciting, and I have some audio that maybe we should play here to kind of remember what happened last year.
So here we go, the Knight 49-yard line. Got to block him to give enough time to throw it deep. 5 seconds to go. Snap back. Holman steps up, throws it towards the end zone. It's going to be...
He got it! He got it! He got it! He got it! Touchdown, Perman! He got it! He got it! Oh, my goodness! UCF wins! Oh, my goodness! Pandemonium on the field! Brashad Perman caught it! 51 yards! Touchdown! The Knights have stunned East Carolina! East Carolina's in shock! Oh, my goodness! And they shoot the cannon! I don't believe it!
My, was that exciting.
That was
I was
awesome.
there with friends. I remember being by the team when they were coming to the buses and greeting the team as they were leaving the locker room. And I showed then athletic director Todd Stansberry the play over. He hadn't seen it yet.
Wow.
And I brought it up on
That's
my
cool.
phone, and a couple of people surrounded us to see it, the replay of it again. Of course, it was long after that I got to hear Mark Daniels call, and that has to be one of the most exciting moments in UCF football history.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can have another exciting moment this week.
But my, what a difference a year makes.
Yeah. Well,
UCF's 0-10. George O'Leary was seen on ESPN, but not for us. He was seen during Thursday night's Virginia Tech game against Georgia Tech.
so was he sitting? I didn't see it.
They
Was
were
he
recognizing the a previous Georgia Tech team that he was a part of when
okay.
they won, so they showed him. I guess, as you said, this may be UCF's best chance at its first win, and we're going to talk to East Carolina insider, as we like to do. We're going to have that as a YouTube extra.
So, that'll
closer
be
to game time. I'll give you a little bit more insight. They're struggling. They're 4-6, and we're coming off the bye week. Can we right the ship?
I hope so. Last week's game was a little bit better, but I mean we've got to do a lot better than that, and hopefully this is the week to do that. one of these last 2 games, we've got to do something. It's our last chance to do it this year. I don't want this team to be 0-12. That would be a bad deal. But, we've got a new AD coming. We're going to have a new coach. It's going to be a whole different story next year, hopefully. You never know what's going to happen.
A lot of ticket promotions going on, distribution of tickets to try and make that stadium look a little bit better on ESPN Thursday night. Question I have for you is, do you think one of the people in attendance will be the next athletic director? UCFsports.com and Brandon Helwig and then other media outlets are reporting that the 3 finalists have been named. Interviews with Dr. Hitt, UCF's president, on Monday, and that by midweek, the naming of the new athletic director may happen. Wonder if he or she will be in attendance on Thursday.
I think that would be a perfect opportunity for them to see what UCF's all about if they don't know. Home football game, I think it just being ECU is going to be exciting. And people should come out for that more than, if it was somebody else.
As our insider said, that's who East Carolina thinks as their top rival.
Absolutely.
I know we look to the Tampa school as a top rival, but through all those years in Conference USA, you certainly have to say that the experiences with East Carolina made that for an exciting rivalry.
It's always been a crazy game. Kyle says it on here. He's said it a couple times that he thinks that ECU is just as big of a rival as the other place.
So the names being mentioned include one that we're going to talk more about with our guest coming up, but is Danny White of Buffalo. State University of New York at Buffalo is one of the names. A deputy athletic director at Kentucky, Dwayne Peavy, is one of the names mentioned. And then the third one is not apparently a name we talked a great deal about last week, someone with UCF ties in Chris Kingston, the athletic director at Bowling Green. Instead, the third name being mentioned is Marcy Girton, chief of staff at Texas A&M's Department of Athletics.
Yeah,
real wild card choice.
I don't know
there.
where she came from in this whole deal. I mean, at all.
Power 5 tie at Texas A&M.
I guess that's it, though. I mean, I have no idea otherwise how her name would even be involved in this. I think that's pretty interesting that it is involved. I mean, obviously she put her name in the hat and had a good interview or something. I don't know. I mean, it's weird. Is there a woman athletic director in the NCAA, I wonder? I don't know that.
At a prominent level?
Yeah.
I don't know that.
I guess that would be something that we should research and see, but I don't, know a lot about her because she was completely off of everybody's radar, I believe.
Not a name mentioned on any of the message boards. And, we talked a great deal. We had Eric Kohler on last week, and this is something that I've spoken about here and I've spoken to you about. For me, I wanted somebody with ties to UCF. That is not to say that I do not want the best hire that we can possibly make at athletic director, at head football coach, in any coaching position that comes available at UCF. I want the best person. I think Dr. Hitt has shown in the hiring of the new director at the UCF Foundation, the new director at the UCF Alumni Association, that he goes outside of the UCF family for hires. So it does not surprise me that this list of finalists may not include someone with direct ties to UCF, either as an alumni or, having
I would
worked.
think that would be what they would have wanted. I really thought that they would, want somebody with ties to the university. And who knows what went on in that interview where, he didn't get
Kingston,
didn't get, a second interview or whatever, was out immediately, I guess. I don't know. Dr. Hitt or whoever interviewed them must have seen something where they weren't interested in him, or maybe he wasn't interested. I don't know. It could have been either way. But the Danny White thing, his name has been mentioned quite a bit on the message boards for sure. People being interested in him. I said on Eric Lopez's show on 1080, when he asked me the qualities that I wanted in a new AD, I said that I wanted somebody that would come in and clean house on a bunch of different programs: basketball, baseball, to be the two really named ones that I would like to see changes at the top. Danny White may be, just maybe, the person to do that. So let's hear the interview with Matt Gritzmacher that we had a little while ago.
Believed to be one of the top candidates for the job of athletic director at UCF is Danny White, current director of athletics at the State University of New York at Buffalo. Now, plenty out there online about White. One article that really stood out is from about a year ago titled State of Buffalo Bulls Athletics, the Danny White Firing Era in Historical Context, written by Matt Gritzmacher, who covers the Bulls at SB Nation. And Matt is good enough to join us to talk about Danny White's tenure at Buffalo. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me and finding me, really.
There were two main points to your article. One, a bit controversial in terms of the turnover of coaching staff for the sports. But let's begin with White being known for a rebranding of Buffalo. Talk a little bit about that first as the main point, first main point of your article.
Sure, and this is, as you mentioned, this article is a year old, and a lot has happened in the last year, too. No matter when White leaves Buffalo, whether it's this week or when his contract's up in 2019 or if when he retires, if I can be so bold, he's going to be remembered for this branding initiative, which you even started at the top of the show, calling Buffalo the State University of New York at Buffalo. That is the legal name of the university, and it's a product of New York State refusing to acknowledge a flagship. I could go through a whole dissertation on this, but essentially there are 4 universities in New York within the SUNY system that are considered parallel by the state. And Buffalo is the biggest, Buffalo is the richest, Buffalo has the best athletics, and they've never been able to get up above them without causing hissy fits to Albany and Stony Brook, and to a lesser extent Binghamton. So what White said is, I don't care about that, I won't open myself up to legal challenges, but we're going to forcefully put out there that we're the largest athletics department, the largest school in the state, the largest public university, and academically, schools like Wisconsin and Illinois and Indiana hold UB as an academic peer, and not enough people, both regionally and nationally, know that. So this whole rebranding thing is to say we are the largest representatives of New York on an athletic scale.
He's been forceful about that. Has he been successful with it?
Yes, it's been a clear success in the things that I want my athletic director to do, which is get more wins and get more money and improve facilities and get more media exposure. It has created a firestorm that still rages all the time in Western New York, where Buffalo and West New York has this little brother syndrome thing going on with New York City, and hate in general is being associated with New York, and we like to call ourselves Western New York, and we get bristle at the idea of upstate, because then there's a comparison to New York versus just being the western part of the state. And it's a thing that's existed well before Danny White and existed outside of athletics. But there's been a big issue of how it diminishes the name Buffalo within the athletics identity. And the one big failure of this, what's called the New York Bulls initiative, is that he didn't get the media on his side first. And he didn't really explain to the media. The plan just kind of showed up, and what it was and how we're going to bring in more money and do this and that and establish our presence. I think that there was this expectation everyone would immediately see, oh yes, more exposure, more money, everything's going to be good. And I don't think he was ready for kind of the Buffalo, New York City pushback and how that would come into rebranding for a statewide audience. And that's now used every time something happens that someone doesn't like, it gets tied back into this, whether it's something that an athletic director should do, like fire coaches that aren't performing, or find a way to bring in more money, or X, Y, and Z. And so it's what he'll be remembered for, no matter how anything else plays out.
Before we talk about the firing of coaches, how has he been in terms of bringing in additional revenue, either through the rebranding or his other efforts?
We haven't done a Freedom of Information Act thing in a while, but he has really invested social capital in local businesses, which is, I think, one of the few areas other than purely winning that he's appealed to the local fans and things. But he has done a huge job. He's got this initiative called Business Backs the Bulls, and has really gotten a lot of buy-in from larger local businesses. More ads are around, more people are buying clumps of tickets and making donations. Certainly donations are up in a big way. Both your regular fan may be paying a little more to get into a different set of seats, and some of that's been done both against the fans' wishes, kind of if you want to keep your seats now, it's a donor-based situation, but a lot of it has been done with the expansion of kind of what every school has, their kind of donors circle, and it's called the Blue and White Fund, and it's what people donate to be known as donors and have special perks. And that's been up. Local business support has been up, and he's gotten quite a bit of larger donations from larger businesses, or what do I want to call them? I don't want to say magnates, but rich people from West New York. He's gotten their buy-in for donations from alums and former folks. Really, if your concern is money, which I know in the brief bits that I've looked around, he was a money guy at Ole Miss, which was his past job before he came to us. And money-wise, he's really instituted a pretty aggressive capital improvement plan for athletics and their facilities, and he hasn't quite gotten the buy-in that he needs to pull together enough to build a field house or to renovate the track, but he has had a number of smaller facilities improvements in the last 2 years that I think people around here ignore a bit.
So should he leave this week for UCF or any other job, you think both the branding and the efforts to raise more money for the athletic program are initiatives that will continue with his successor?
I think that the athletic department is really at a critical time, and I'm not so sure, and that's what's got me worried. I personally am not the biggest fan of White, but when I think about what I want my athletic department to do, I think he's been a massive success. UB and UCF jumped up to then Division 1A at the same time, and UConn did in the same year. And if you just look at those three schools, you can kind of get an idea of where Buffalo is. UCF had a more stable history of kind of football success, and UB rushed their move back up to Division I after the program was shut down in the 70s. But even through to the late 2000s, to Danny White's predecessor, Ward Manuel, who's now actually the athletic director at UConn, the school never invested in athletics, and we're really only 2 athletics directors in to even caring about it and seeing it as a viable and important part of the university. And his predecessor was very big on, we need these people, we need athletics to be treated like an equal at the university, and he's really the first guy who's come in and said, athletics can be a key part to build the university's brand and be a leader. And I don't think that any of these things have gained enough traction or enough immediate success for locals to look at and see that it's a given that they'll continue. I think that UB's had a new president come in since Danny White's been in charge, and he seems very friendly to athletics, unlike past presidents. And so our hope is, as we've been talking this morning, that the folks who are in charge share Danny White's vision and do go to find someone who shares that will keep these things continuing. But it's my fear that the New York stuff hasn't taken enough of a hold that if the next person feels it's not worth it to possibly further antagonize the locals, it'll go away, and that'll just kind of be 3-4 years. At the end of the day, we're just treading water.
Danny White is a former basketball player at Notre Dame. Does he seem to treat the sports equally as far as football and basketball there in Buffalo, or is one much more important? We all know that football makes a ton of revenue for schools, but Does he seem to treat everything as an equal, or does he favor one over the other? Or
we certainly had the impression through his first couple of years that he was more of a basketball guy. He extended the contract of Jeff Quinn pretty early in football, and Quinn was fine, but he always underperformed a bit. We had Khalil Mack, who ended up being a top 5 pick and didn't even win our division. Had a good year for UB and for where the football program has been, but didn't even win the division with Quinn. And then he extended Quinn early, and it might not have been the right move compared to some of the other options that were available. Whereas in basketball, he came in, we had a long-term coach, beloved by the locals, started at a local high school, coached at a local JUCO, came in 1999 in the midst of a scandal, and had been a very stable force in periods and had very strong teams within the conference. And he gave Reggie Witherspoon 1 year and brought in Bobby Hurley, who everyone who pays attention to basketball knows about. And everyone really got the feeling that he had Hurley waiting from the beginning, and it really seemed like he was more on basketball, given that he had let Quinn stick around, given him an extension, and then brought in this real risky but savvy hire in Hurley as a first-time coach. In this past offseason, he's hired Lance Leipold, another really savvy hire, proven success at another level, and Leipold has come in and said, football is football, and I'll be able to succeed at Division I. And for our standards, he has. We're 5-5 now on the cusp of a bowl eligibility, which will be only the 3rd time since we've come up to this level. And it was a strong hire. We think that he knows basketball more and is more involved in basketball, but it seems like he's surrounded himself with the right idea of how to find success in football.
It says something here in your article about being banned from 2014-2015 postseason. Was that in all sports, and what was the story behind that?
That was wrestling, and that's a specific example. So wrestling was an absolute disarray. Any problem you can think of, they had it. And that coach was a longtime coach, and White fired him and hired a guy who was a former UB wrestler, one of UB's best ever, a successful coach at another D1 school, which is not D1 in any other sport, but a successful wrestling head coach. And he met a lot of criticism there for firing the previous coach. But in the interim now, this new guy has brought in a bunch of young talent, some really strong recruiting classes, and had an upset of Maryland, a Big Ten program, 2 weekends ago, and nearly upset West Virginia, who's ranked right now. That banning, I think most who are familiar enough with those sports, with the Olympic sports like I am, recognize that it was a failure of the prior coaches that led to postseason ban last year, but that was only in wrestling.
Well, let's then delve more into the second part of your article where you talk about perhaps his itchy trigger finger in terms of coaches. Is it fair to say that if he is going to sink or swim, he wants to be judged by the quality of his hires rather than inheriting someone else's?
Absolutely. And within, I think, I'm trying to remember the state of mind I was in when I wrote this article, but I think within the first year and a half of being around, he had turned over half of the school's coaches. And his standard has always been very clear. Our team should compete for conference championships, and that's what he wants. And I've talked about football and basketball. The basketball hire was the one that's, in addition to the branding stuff, has really set off other people, but then they found success, so I think that's been mostly forgotten. He absolutely wants to sink or swim with his hires, and with his guys, and he's got, I wouldn't say demanding standards, but he's very, very clear about what he wants, and he wants to compete for conference championships. I called both his football and basketball hires savvy, and it's really what we've gotten across all sports. He's been very aggressive in finding folks who have experienced a measure of success, whether they're coaches who have previously coached at Power 5 football conference universities and found a way to get them in, or everyone he's hired has been a top of their level when they competed in college. He's hired former All-Americans, former national champions at a number of sports, folks who have international experience in soccer. I mentioned the wrestling guy. He's got a pretty, I shouldn't even say pretty good, everyone is very, very pleased with the quality of his hires over and over again. We've had 2 volleyball coaches in 2 years because one did well enough to leave, and the second hire we were not sure on. She's a first-time coach, but she's matched the best year ever in conference, and he really has a knack for finding whether the program needs someone who's got experience being a head coach at a top level, whether it's someone who's got experience being a top-level player, or someone who is a long-time assistant just finally ready to break through. He hasn't missed on a hire yet, and we had a lot of jokes at the time, and that's what this article was, to kind of say, jokes aside, this is a real success. He hasn't missed on a hire yet. He was a little aggressive at the beginning in getting there, but they've all been home runs, really.
How would you assess his emphasis on academic success of his athletic programs and as well the compliance that goes with the university sports? Every
semester for the last 3 years, they've been touting that it's the highest GPA ever across all of athletics. I wouldn't say from our perspective as fans or as someone who's, I'm not a beat writer, I'm a fan blogger. It doesn't come out as a very strong emphasis, but there are more academic, whether it's all region, all academic, or conference, all academic teams, it's more of that. Across the board, all sports as collective are up semester over semester for 3 years now. Football's up pretty high. I can't say more on that. It doesn't seem to be a huge public emphasis, but there haven't been any red flags since, you give him a year to establish himself, and since then there haven't been any red flags academically.
So bottom line, would a Buffalo fan, a fan of the sports at Buffalo, say we at UCF would be getting a good hire in Danny White as Director of Athletics, should that happen later in the week?
I think it would be an excellent hire for UCF. Honestly, I talked a bit at the top about how the 2 schools entered then Division 1A at the same time. I think to some extent he might be frustrated with the local climate here, but in the things that he has been able to do, it's been successes across the board. I would be sad to see him go because I think some of his projects are just beginning to gain traction. As I said, I think UCF should be very happy if they hire him, because it feels like if he were to stick around Buffalo for a few more years and some of these things would take hold, he would have the track record for a bigger job. And UCF is bigger than Buffalo, and I wish we were in the American. But most of us were expecting him to stick around and really build up a killer resume and jump all the way up to a SEC job or an ACC job. And if he's going to move on from Buffalo, he doesn't have the resume to do that yet, and it could be a real coup for an athletic department not in those top 5 conferences to get him for 4, 5, 6 years at a minimum. I think it would be somewhere where he'd feel more comfortable that he'd get more through. There's much more local and student support at UCF, and it's a better conference and it's a better location. I think he could see it as a real opportunity, and I think UCF would be getting someone who is young and is on his way up. And I'd be very happy if I were a UCF fan and they hired him.
Thank you very much, Matt, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Your insight has been very valuable. Hope our listeners will take these things that were said into account, and we'll see what happens here in the next week or so.
All right, cool. Well, thank you again for finding me, and I'm happy to talk Buffalo anytime.
Going to be interesting. Next couple of days, going to have a new face at the lead of the UCF athletic department.
Yeah, I mean, we will know soon, hopefully. And then we can get on to hiring a football coach.
That'll be next week's speculation.
Yeah.
Before we get to our next guest, a couple of other sports notes we're going to be talking more about with Sports Talk Florida's Eric Lopez. Men's hoop, they dropped their opener at Davidson. Final score 90-85. Taco Fall makes his debut after making headlines all week. Very viral on the free taco movement. ESPN with features on it, and what a mess that was, huh?
Yeah, I'm glad he got to play. I mean, it was a little crazy with thinking that he wasn't going to get to play, and through all that he's done at the school that he went to for high school, that they would try to deem him ineligible on a guy that was like an honor roll student and everything else. I mean, I understand that he came from, someplace else, but come on.
School that didn't start last week. They've been around for a while.
They've been around for a while.
By the way, did you know that he knows 4 languages?
Oh, I'm sure.
That's 4 more than a lot of people.
His story is pretty interesting, and they talked a little bit about it on ESPN, of how he came from, I believe, was it Senegal is where he's from, and, how he was at another school, the one in Texas, and how he wanted to talk to somebody about what was going on, and they were in an apartment with no phone, no way to reach anybody, to talk to anybody, and then came Florida. And it's interesting how those players get here and then what they have to do to become eligible and everything else. But he did what he needed to do. The NCAA finally would acknowledge that, and so he got to play the other night. He he played for 14 minutes in the game, and he, I believe, had
4 points.
4 points, 3 rebounds.
He hadn't practiced in the ramp-up to this opener at all. So B.J. Taylor didn't play, recovering from injury. UCF lost last year at home to Davidson by a lot of points, like 95-69 or something like that. So a closer margin. My concern in looking at this first game stats, and I know you can't read in a 30-game schedule or whatever, it's going to be 29, 30 games. UCF struggled again from the free throw line, and that has been a hallmark of the Donnie Jones era, struggling from the free throw line. And defense, and we get into a little bit more about this with Eric, but defense also. The struggles on defense has been a hallmark of the Donnie Jones team. Not to take anything away from Davidson, that is a talented team, a tournament team. My prediction, I know we kind of abandoned football predictions a while ago. Kind of got hard to talk about how badly we thought they were going to lose every week. But I look at the schedule and I think 6-5 in the non-con and 6 wins in the conference, and I think a 12-17 mark. And I don't know how, with a new athletic director coming in, that's going to be good enough to keep Donnie, unless the team is very competitive. The AAC tournament is in Orlando at the Amway. I think that just heightens the need for UCF to have a good year. I just don't believe that this team, even if better, is going to be better than Cincinnati, UConn, SMU. There are good teams in the American. Given the way that we lost to Davidson the last time, and then only losing by 5 points, I mean, at the end of the game, it was tight there. I think that this is definitely, there's positives by only losing to Davidson by 5 points. I don't disagree with that, and I think they can be better. I believe that they will be better. Good enough to get past UConn, Cincinnati,
Yeah, I don't know.
Memphis,
about that. Yeah.
SMU. I just don't see that happening, and I'd like to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, we will see, because the home opener is Wednesday night
At 7 at CFE Arena. UC Irvine will be in town.
which
Saturday,
is another good team.
Another good team. Then Saturday, another home game, also 7 o'clock against UNC Greensboro.
Yeah, and I don't know about them, but definitely, you should go out there if you have a chance to see this, because Taco Fall himself is reason to go and watch this team, because he's pretty amazing.
On Wednesday's game, UCI has also a 7'6" player, so going to be matched up with Taco.
That'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 7'6"
How
guys,
often
you
do you
don't
see
see
that?
that very often. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward just to seeing him, because I've seen him. He was at most of the games last year. He's been on campus quite a bit. Outside of football
Taco.
games and everything. Yeah, Taco.
And a fan
so-
favorite. And seems like a really nice kid, and makes a point to visit with the fans. Who
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's
talk
going to
to him.
be here for 4 years, which is something that's pretty cool as well, because he wants to get a degree in engineering, and that's, I think, more important to him is the education versus the basketball thing. I'm sure that if he does well here, they might want to try to pull him away to the NBA or whatever. But
All right.
I
Don't
hope-
get ahead of yourself.
I
there.
hope-
It's been one game.
I hope that he stays here and we get to watch him for 4 years and see him, get better and all that. So
I agree. Our own John Swift was one of the 4,676 in attendance at Belk Arena in Davidson, North Carolina for the UCF opener. And as he does from time to time, John is crunching the numbers.
Welcome to Crunching the Numbers, featuring John Swift.
Hello, Knight fans. Not many numbers to crunch this week with a bye week in football, but I attended the Davidson and UCF basketball game last night and thought I'd give a little recap. Davidson, nice little school. Students there have 2 bags outside of their door, one for laundry and one for dry clean. Pretty nice privilege, but I guess that's what $60,000 a year gets you. On to the basketball game. Taco Fall getting his first career start. He looked like a giant out there. Long wingspan. You can tell once he starts understanding how to use his body to his advantage, he's going to be a good player for us. He had 2 monster blocks, and I love when he gets in the paint. I mean, it's just give the ball to him, and he just turns and dunks. Phenomenal to see. I just haven't seen anything like it. Still a raw player. Seems to lack a little bit of a feel for the basketball, but you can tell he's going to be a contributor. Donis Enriquez had a great game, and this is without B.J. Taylor. I think offensively we had a lot more flow. All in all, we're going to be a lot better ball club than we were last year. The depth is there. Some issues still. Defense looked pretty bad. Not a lot of help side defense or rotational defense. Gave up a lot of points to Gibbs, who I think had 35 on their team, who was a really great basketball player. Free throws are still a problem for us. Nothing different from last year. I thought we took a little bit better care of the ball. Didn't have as many turnovers as we did last year. We need to get a little more aggressive in rebounding. I think we clearly had a height advantage against Davidson and just didn't really take advantage of that. And I think defensively, too, we should have pressured a little more, given our length and athleticism. I mean, at every position, we were taller and more athletic. But all in all, a good effort on the road against a pretty solid basketball club. It was a fun game. I enjoyed it. Some things to look out for, I'd say, from some of the newcomers. I talked about Taco Fall, obviously. McBride, he looked winded again after about 5 minutes of play, but instant offense. He knows how to use his body. I think we need to feed him quite a bit more. The name you'll probably hear quite a bit this season is McSpadden. I mean, he's going to be good for us. Made a few mistakes. He's a true freshman, but he's just aggressive. He'll attack the rim, not afraid to lay it all out in the paint, and just had a good feel for the game. I really think he's going to be a good impact player for us this season. It'll be interesting to see how many minutes he can get with B.J. Taylor coming back and some of the experience we have, but I think he gives us a good dynamic on offense. On defense, he looked pretty solid, but he had a tough task of defending Gibbs, so it's hard to tell how much of an all-around player he can be. But all in all, a great time. Really enjoyed it. Davidson folks were nice. I saw about 10, maybe 15 UCF fans there, talked to quite a few. It was a great time. Unfortunately, couldn't get the W, but I think we'll see a lot more W's this coming season. So charge on and go Knights.
Well, John was in Davidson. I was out at the UCF soccer complex to watch the women's game. Women's soccer knocked out of the NCAA playoffs during a shootout loss to William & Mary Saturday night. 0-0 after 2 overtimes, or as they like to say in soccer, 0-0. Though UCF loses in PKs 3-1.
Watching that game in person, according to his Twitter handle, and also listening to men's basketball on the radio, the ultimate multitasker, Eric Lopez, Sports Talk Florida radio host and play-by-play voice of UCF softball. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing good. The blood pressure is down now after, kind of a close finishes there with women's soccer and men's basketball and just a little bit of everything. It's always it's really starting to pick up now with UCF athletics. But it's good, guys. Appreciate being on.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons going on in the athletic world of UCF, probably more than in a very long time with the AD search, a coaching search. We have basketball that started last night. We have baseball and softball starting to ramp up. We've got soccer going on. We got all kinds of stuff. What's your opinion of how this is all going and where's UCF headed with all this?
It's just kind of a weird fall, right? It's been a weird last few months with football, the way the season's gone, unfortunately. I don't think anybody would have ever imagined this. Even the most cynical of a person that would have been cynical about this upcoming football season and all the changes there, it's just been kind of a surreal. And then it's kind of, the athletics side of things, I think, now I think people are more kind of hoping for somebody else to step up and some positive news and something positive to kind of move forward from a really difficult football season. And I think from a basketball standpoint, I know it's one game and it's Davidson, but all things considered how they were shorthanded, I think there's some positives. I think that people could be excited about heading for basketball and maybe some of the other sports. And then, of course, who's going to be in charge, who's going to be the head coach. This is really kind of going to be a very dramatic finish to the calendar year for UCF athletics.
Well, as the names have come out, rumored names in the final three for the athletic director position, any observations from you? What stands out? Surprises? What are your thoughts on the names as they've been mentioned?
Well, I think the first thing I'm surprised, probably like some would be, is that Chris Kingston, the athletic director of Bowling Green, is not one of the finalists. He's a UCF grad. He's been an AD at Bowling Green, so that's a bit of a surprise. I thought he for sure would be right there in the mix. Certainly Danny White, that's been a name that's been brought up before, and certainly there's connections with his father and, of course, John Hitt being friends. Of course, for those that don't know, Danny White, his father is Kevin White, the AD now at Duke currently. In fact, his brother Mike White's the head coach at Florida, so, of course, he's been the AD at Buffalo. And it's kind of it's an interesting guy, I tell you, from the far. He's not shy to make moves. I believe he made a lot of moves in Buffalo and try to generate some more revenues there, which is not an easy place to do it at. And so, I guess if speculation's accurate that he would be the front runner, but then you also have got two people there, the finalists from power conferences that are looking to take that next step. So it's an interesting process, and I think from all indications is we'll have an answer here by the end of the week.
Do you remember what I told you when I was on your radio show a couple of weeks ago about what I wanted in an athletic director?
You wanted a man that could make changes, right?
That's it. So Danny White seems like he could be that guy.
Yeah. He fits your criteria. Maybe they listen to you, Andrew. Maybe they listen to that show, and they're like, we need to get a guy to make moves, because he did. I believe he fired 6 coaches or something like that, some number like that in the last 8 months.
I think he came in there and pretty much cleaned house and turned their entire programs around, I believe. Pretty much their football team is winning. It's yet to be seen what their basketball team done. They were in some deep trouble with a couple of their teams, like wrestling, I guess, was in a really bad way, and they were actually banned from postseason for the last 2 years and all that stuff. So, yeah, hopefully he can come in here and maybe, of course, we talked about Donnie Jones and thinking that he was probably on the hot seat as well. So I think Donnie Jones may be needing to kind of watch out and push this basketball team a little harder this year.
Well, I think anytime there's a change and there's a new athletic director, a new boss, there's going to be, I think, some urgency about everybody. I don't think it's just coaches, but I think employees and everything. I think they want to make a good impression, and there's certainly added pressure with that, because usually athletic directors tend to like their own guy. That's what makes kind of Stansberry's era very interesting, is that he didn't get rid of anybody from a coaching standpoint. He kind of stood pat. Clearly, Danny White is an opposite of that. If his actions in Buffalo are kind of an indication, and you wonder, you always hear the sports theory about, they always hire the opposite of what they just had. you wonder if again, if they go with Danny White, if that's part of it, is they want a guy that's more aggressive and can kind of take it to the next level, and kind of reading up on him. I think, too, there's clearly a marketing angle to this, right? A branding that I think is expected out of the position, and kind of grow the name and try to generate revenue for UCF athletics.
Would you be surprised at this point if it ended up not being White based on the chatter that we're hearing? And second question, or you personally, what would you be looking for in that athletic director hire?
Yes, I would be surprised, but I've been surprised before. I've been surprised. If you would have told me back in July or August that George O'Leary would be the interim AD, I would have said there was no way that was going to happen, and it happened. If you would have told me the team would have a football season that they would be winless at this point with interim coach, I would have said you're crazy. So I'm almost to the point where nothing could surprise me anymore. I think from an AD standpoint, what you want is you want him to run the athletic department the way the athletic department is supposed to be run, and I think is obviously help the football program generate money, generate interest, go out to the public, and get the boosters engaged with the programs and the school. But I also don't think he needs to be ignoring the other sports, and clearly, in Buffalo's indication, he has not done that. What I find interesting is clearly he's got some basketball background, so I do think he's going to take care of all the sports, not just football. And to Danger's point, I mean, certainly that means Donnie Jones certainly adds more pressure to him and maybe other coaches as well. So I don't think he's just going to be a football guy. I think he's going to be all sports, and I think he's going to try and make sure that all sports are successful and competing at a high level, and at the same time trying to help them the best they can from a financial and resource standpoint.
So Donnie Jones, one of the names, men's basketball, that might be on that hotter seat. What other coaches do you think might be a little bit uncomfortable with change in athletic director?
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think obviously the football is going to be decided, head coach already, so you would think Danny White or whoever is the next AD will make that decision with John Hitt and, of course, the involvement in the decision-making. I think certainly baseball, Terry Rooney, obviously, Coach Rooney there, know very well. Obviously, baseball, there's some questions there with facility issues there, that funding and stuff like that. Those things have to be addressed, and can they be addressed? And, that's probably the ones that would stand out, I think. But I think basketball programs, I know Andrews told me this off the air. I mean, Donnie Jones, Joy Williams, women's basketball. I would say those are the two at the front end. It just so happens that their seasons have started. But I'm sure that that's where the focus is going to be and the focal point will be. I would not even be surprised if the new AD's first sporting event is a UCF basketball game if he doesn't make it in time for the football game.
Interesting. The basketball team starts off more competitive, but a year later still loses to Davidson, again closer. 0-1 now to start the season. Realistically, in the very competitive American, where you have Cincinnati and you have UConn and SMU, Tulsa, good programs, what is realistic for improvement, and is that number enough?
That's going to be the magical question, I think, as we play on this season. I think they have to finish probably in that 5 through 7 range. I think SMU, Connecticut, Tulsa are probably the top 3. Memphis is kind of a wild card team this year. They've got 8 new players. There's questions about the chemistry on that team. We don't know how good Memphis will be. Of course, Cincinnati will be up there as well. So I would say those teams are the top 4. And I think if you're UCF, if you could compete and be at that 5, 6, 7 range, I think you have to be better than South Florida. I think that's no doubt. You have to be better than Tulane. You have to be better than Houston with Calvin Sampson in his second year in Houston over there. And East Carolina, which has been a nemesis with Jeff Legal. I think those are the programs that the question's going to be, can you be better than these programs and be in a very difficult conference, granted, but still be in the middle of the pack, I think is kind of the goal.
Well, there was definitely some positives the other night with the basketball game for sure. You know, some familiar names, of course, and some names that aren't so familiar with people. Henriquez came out of it with 18 points. Matt Williams came out with 12 points. And then Chance McSpadden, which a lot of people don't know anything about, had 11 points. A.J. Davis, we're seeing him for the first time with 10 points. But then I guess the big story was Taco Fall. and him, actually being able to compete in this game. We didn't think that was going to happen. What do you think went wrong with the NCAA? Is this like a thing that you've ever heard of before? Is it a thing that happens regularly?
It happens regularly, and quite honestly, it just shows again that the NCAA is incompetent at times. I think they're undermanned. I don't think they're really up for these type of things. And look, I mean, there's a lot of skepticism about athletes and student athletes and how they get into the bigger programs and, the school systems. But here's a case in Taco Fall. Great kid, high GPA, is here at UCF to be studying engineering and just basically followed what everybody told him what he had to do. And what's hilarious is he's ruled ineligible one Friday, and then 7 days later, after they kind of get the waiver, he's cleared, and it's just hilarious, and it's unfortunate because it cost him practice time. Because when they ruled him ineligible a couple weeks ago, he was not allowed to practice anymore with the team, and I think that hurt him a little bit on Saturday against Davidson. So I do think the NCAA caved a little bit. I think it was great to see kind of the national media kind of jump on this story, with Scott Van Pelt doing a big piece on his show. Jay Billis, Dick Vitale. These are the big power names that were making real noise about this, and I think it helped the NCAA kind of cave here. And I think everybody kind of realized, came to their senses, and it's like, this kid's done nothing wrong. Let's let him play. So I'm very happy about that. I think that's a positive for everybody, but it's certainly big because I think he's a wild card. He's a huge factor for this team. If you watch the game when he was on the court, defensively, they're a completely different team. They're much better defensively with him. He's a rim protector, obviously. He's a shot blocker. And you saw when he was not on the court how they gave up some easy baskets down the stretch in the game. So I think as he gets more involved and gets more practice now and gets more comfortable, I think he's a huge factor for a defense that I think is huge. Because this young UCF basketball the last couple of years, rim protection and rebounding was a big issue with this team. And they may be much better at that now, especially with Taco on the team.
So you think that he has the potential to develop into much more a force than some other notable big names in years past on men's basketball? I remember Ben Stout from a few years ago in Cuba and these sorts of names that were big guys but didn't do a whole heck of a lot. You think there is a decided difference with Taco Fall?
Yes. He's got more skill than those guys you mentioned. Those guys are much bigger projects. Taco's played basketball at high level. I think he's definitely got the skills defensively, and I think he can finish around the rim. And you look at UCF inside with him and McBride and Stephon Blair. He's just a huge presence for them, and he can move. So it's not like the other guys you mentioned had hard times moving. They were not really mobile, and so you can kind of take advantage of them defensively by their lack of mobility. With Taco, he can move around, and I think he's a factor. How good he can be, I don't know that, but I do think he's a factor, especially on the defensive side of the court. He was a big math factor when he was in the game. He was a factor and helped UCF get back into the game against Davidson.
He only scored 4 points. He had 3 rebounds, but I guess he was only in there for 14 minutes. But from what I heard, I didn't get to see it. It wasn't on TV, so I guess he was swatting baskets down and stuff like that. So his defense is, quite a bit better for sure. And he's going to help. Like you said, the defense for UCF basketball has been actually kind of hideous in the last couple of years, and we've really need to step that up. What else did you hear or see in the UCF basketball the other night that impressed you?
I was impressed. They got right back in the game. They fell behind by double digits early. They were down 10 at the half. Remember, Davidson's an NCAA tournament team. They're a quality team. I think they're a top 30 team. They got one of the best players in the country that maybe a lot of people don't know about, Jack Gibbs, who was phenomenal, 35 points for them in the victory. But no B.J. Taylor, who I think is their best player on the team. He was their point guard. He did not play, as a deep bone bruise in his foot. He hadn't practiced. They're hopeful he can be back for UC Irvine. Who knows? So I was very kind of concerned about how they would fare in Davidson, but they hung in there. They were right there toward the end. I think Adonis Enriquez, tremendous in his sophomore year, shooting the ball from the perimeter. This team can shoot the basketball from the perimeter with Adonis. You got A.J. Davis, you mentioned, played limited minutes. Foul trouble was really an issue for them on Saturday night. It forced Donnie to go to the bench a lot, but I think it showed that for the first time, maybe since now the sanctions are gone and they got full scholarships, he's got more depth than he's had in the last few years. So I think there's a lot of positives to carry from that game. They got a very good UC Irvine team coming up going into that. I'd like to see this team at full strength with a couple of practices in. But I think there's positives, and I think they moved the ball better. 18 assists for a team. Last year, the ball kind of was too much dribble at times, and that was disconcerting. I like the ball movement. I think there are a lot of positives I think Knights fans we could take going into UC Irvine and beyond.
Shifting back to football, 2 games remain, 0-10 so far. Friends have asked me, are we going to see a win? And I just don't know that it's going to happen this year. Got a chance against East Carolina. Your thoughts going into the East Carolina game Thursday, and then that Thanksgiving tilt, that rivalry game with South Florida?
Well, I think, right, unfortunately, if I had to rank those two, I would probably pick the East Carolina game right now. I watched South Florida over the weekend. They beat Temple, and they're playing pretty good. Mac, the running back's playing at a high level. They're very physical up front, and they're certainly the quarterback Flowers can make plays with his legs. That's going to be a tough matchup for UCF there. I think East Carolina, they've had issues. They've had injuries. I think they're going to play 2 quarterbacks against UCF, possibly. So maybe UCF can kind of get a good head start there after a bye week and kind of put some pressure on East Carolina. It's not that great of a football team, 4-6, but let's be honest, I think we have to see it to believe it, the way the team has performed all season long. I mean, there's nothing really on the field that you can feel comfortable going into a game saying, yeah, this is going to go well. Justin Holman hasn't played great. You hope that maybe this bye week and they can get something figured out there. But it's tough, guys. It's been a difficult season. I know it's been tough for you guys to talk about it on a every week for a lengthy period of time. And I know sometimes it sounds like a broken record, but the mistakes. And the thing that's tough with this team is when a couple of plays go wrong or go negative, it seems like the team goes south. And so it's that's tough. That's tough to win a football game that way. And so they might play well against East Carolina and South Florida. I think they will, but the question is going to be, what happens if there's a fumble or an interception or a blown coverage? Does the team start going in a nosedive, or do they kind of fight back? And that's kind of been one of the disappointments this year.
Well, you saw last week we actually got some turnovers and stuff like that. We had a little bit more of a running game. Last week they almost put it together, to be honest with you. Against
they
East
did.
Carolina,
maybe they can carry that over. You hope that the Tulsa game, they played well in that second half, and I think that was the best sign, Andrew, because I know when you were on air with me after the Cincinnati game, you weren't alone. A lot of people thought, well, this team just quit. They quit. Right. And I think what happened is the Cincinnati week, that was a rough week with obviously the situation with Coach O'Leary and the changes there. I think that was a week that was just too much for those players to kind of overcome. So I think the fact that they're still playing hard, and I got to believe that these guys don't want to be known as a team that goes winless in a season and maybe go down as the worst UCF team ever. So you like to think with 2 home games on a Thursday night, primetime television, that these guys will rise to the occasion and maybe build on that second half against Tulsa and get off to a good start. What was the last time that we could, maybe what, an FIU game where UCF led by 2 scores in a game? It seems like they've always been playing from behind or even. Or, the Temple game, they led by 1 score, but they can never really go that next step, even though Temple gave them a lot of opportunities. So you wonder if this team could get off to a quick 10-0 lead or a 14-3 lead, if maybe all of a sudden it can kind of carry that over with the crowd.
Yeah, something that I found pretty interesting was that they actually turned it on in the third quarter for the first time. Historically, UCF has been pretty bad second-half team, except for, maybe not second-half team, but at least third-quarter team. Because we had all those come-from-behind wins, or the last-second wins, the cardiac nights, all that stuff. But it's been a while since we saw UCF football turn it on in the third quarter. Do you think that that's something that Coach Barrett has gotten into them with this last game? What happened there to make them actually, come out and want to play? Is it something different that they're being told in the locker room? We've all speculated, and Kyle has talked about how the locker room at halftime wasn't always the nicest spot to be in, as a player. Do you think Barrett's doing something different, saying something different to him in the locker room at halftime?
I don't know if there's anything necessarily different going on, but I think Danny obviously is a very fiery guy. I think kept their spirits up. And you remember that game, Tulsa started turning the ball over. UCF converted to some points. And I think they started feeling good about themselves again. I felt like for the first time in a while they felt energized. I remember there was a sight to see on the bench during that second half. I think the guys were in there. They thought, hey, we got a chance to win this game. And unfortunately, they could just never get over the hump. But I felt that, again, just like all the negative plays kind of really explode on you, I think there were some positive plays that kind of went their way, and they kind of fed off of that. So I think they're playing hard for Danny Barrett. And look, let's be honest, guys. All these players, they're playing for their positions next year because there's nobody on this roster that is guaranteed of a starting job or anything next year with a new head coach. We talked earlier about how the athletic director and how all the coaches kind of feel about that, and if there's more pressure. If you're a player, if you want to start next year, the new coach is going to watch this tape, and they're going to find out who's the guy that's competing and playing hard and who's the guy that quit.
The AD will be named soon enough, and of course all focus will then be on the next head coach. I listened from afar via the internet when Andrew was on your radio show, and it called for a Pelini to be the head coach. Any names you're hearing, or any rumor mill you want to throw out there on some names that interest you?
Well, I think there's 3 or 4 names that I think kind of jumps out, and I think the connections make sense. Let's start with Jeff Collins. He's the defensive coordinator at Florida. Used to be the defensive coordinator at UCF, 2008, 2009. I've heard from my friends up in Gainesville that he's telling people that he feels that he's going to be the next head coach at UCF. Now, we got to caution that. We don't know if that's him or his agent trying to pump himself up, trying to get a raise, trying to kind of stock the profile for another job, or is he being serious? Keep in mind, Florida loses a lot of defensive players next year from this team, so he might be kind of campaigning for another job. But I think Jeff Collins will be in the mix with his ties to the recruiting in the state of Florida, his ties to UCF. I think he's a guy that's ready to take that next step and be a head coach. So I think he's at the top of the list. I think a couple of names to throw out there. I think Gene Chizik is going to be thrown out there. Defensive coordinator at North Carolina, of course, won a national title as a head coach at Auburn. Former defensive coordinator at UCF, which I think would be a popular hire from the old-time Knight players, kind of the Asante Samuels, the Elton Pattersons, if you will. I think those guys would be rooting for a Gene Chizik hire. I think they would approve of that. I don't know how that would go over with some other Knight fans, but I think he's a name that's going to get brought up. And I think another name is DJ Durkin. Durkin, to keep in mind, the defensive coordinator at Michigan, has ties to Florida in recruiting. I think that's going to be a big part of this. I would be surprised, guys, that the next head coach does not have some ties to either the state of Florida in coaching or recruiting. I think that's going to be something that's going to be circled, because I think as we've seen in the last few years, the recruiting here in the state has not gone well for UCF.
Did you see, by chance, my Kansas City Chiefs putting a whooping on the Denver Broncos over there in Denver?
I did. You sent Peyton Manning to the bench.
I know. That's pretty incredible. All right.
Dominant performance, end of an era.
All right, so talk to us a little bit about what's coming up with UCF softball this spring, I guess. I know some preparations are starting to happen there in softball land. What's the season going to be like? What's the team going to look like?
Well, we just finished the fall ball. We actually broadcasted the first ever fall ball game, black and gold game. It's been a good turnout. They got a lot of returning players from last year. They won 50 games last season. They returned an All-American pitcher in Shelby Tournier. She was first-team All-American in the country. So she's going to be the leader of this team, especially in the pitching staff. They do lose another All-American pitcher, Mackenzie Audis, to graduation. So I think that's going to be one of the questions, who replaces those innings. They return, I believe, 6-7 starters offensively. Good core offensively, including the player of the year, Jessica Yavari. They got some players they got to replace. Kaylee Novak, who's out playing professionally now, starting second baseman. Ferris Sullivan is a former player. So there's some new faces on the team that I think are very good, and I think they're an offensive team. They're going to be the favorites again in the conference. How do they handle the expectations? They're probably going to be a top 20 preseason team when the season comes out. They've got a incredible schedule, one of the top schedules in the country. They're playing the who's who of college softball. They're going to be playing in some of the marquee tournaments in the country. So this team is going to get challenged early, and I think they're trying to repeat as regular season champions of the American Conference. And I think they're trying to go deeper in the postseason. I think talking to some of the players, I think they're still a bad taste in their mouth, the way the regional ended in Tallahassee, Florida State, a regional that could have gone either way. So I think there's a lot of excitement. I think there's a lot of familiar faces, and I think the expectations are super high there with UCF, and I think that's how they like it now, to the point where now every year they're expected to win the conference and go and compete deep into postseason. And I think that's kind of the exciting part about it, because it used to be maybe every other year they would be good, and they lost a lot of personnel. But now, with the way recruiting is going, with the exposure that the program has gotten, thanks to football, with the Fiesta Bowl and the television exposure, now more athletes know what UCF is, who UCF is, and more talent now is coming to UCF softball, better talent than ever before, which is an exciting time for the program.
Thank you so much for your insight on that stuff, especially because I don't think anybody follows UCF softball nearly as close as you do, especially doing the play-by-play and stuff like that. How can people reach you on Twitter and find you anywhere else, hear you on the radio, all that stuff?
Oh, you can follow me on Twitter on Eric Lopez Elo on Twitter. I certainly host the Saturday afternoon shows on Sports Talk 1080 The Team, which, Andrew, you had a guest a couple of weeks ago, and I'll have it back in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
That's on Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and then also host a Monday night show during the fall and football season from Harry Buffalo, 6 to 7. So I'm kind of all over the place. The best place, follow me on Twitter, and you can find some of the details there. Of course, during the spring, I'll be broadcasting UCF softball. You can listen and watch that on UCFKnights.com. They'll have details on that, and who knows what other stuff. Just keep it on Twitter, boys. But, hey, in the meantime, I just enjoy listening to you guys, and I tell you, credit to you guys for talking UCF football. Maybe in a very difficult season, you guys have at least made it entertaining to listen to.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that, especially with what you've got going on and all that stuff. It means a lot to hear that from someone that's on the radio, involved in all this stuff, and you know, knows what you're talking about there. I appreciate that more than you can imagine. Thank you for having me as a guest on your show. That was an incredible experience. I've never been on the radio before, so that was a completely different kind of a deal for me. It was awesome, though. I greatly appreciate it.
You were fantastic, man. You were fantastic. Trust me. You're going to have to come back.
Oh,
we'll have to set that up down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be totally happy to do that. All right, so thank you for being with us tonight. We'll definitely talk to you during the softball season. Once that gets a little closer, we'll have you on for a preview and all that stuff.
Sounds great, guys. Anytime you need me, I'm here for you. Just keep up the great work. I know a lot of UCF fans appreciate it.
Right on. Thank you so much.
The American in the spotlight this week with a couple of interesting games. Navy keeps climbing up in the polls. And Houston now up to number 13 in the one poll. Exciting game with Memphis.
Yeah, man, I watched that game. That was absolutely amazing, going back and forth. And I think I was rooting for Houston just because I wanted them to, continue their winning streak and be undefeated.
Well, that dream is still alive.
Yeah, I don't really like Memphis, either. So
they deserved it. They rallied back. They were down 20.
Yeah, there were quite a few good American games this week.
Navy keeps winning. Navy's 8-1.
Yeah,
and so another team becoming bowl eligible in Cincinnati. So the league is stronger this year. Really, the laggards have been Tulane, SMU, and UCF.
A Navy fan asked me the other day, what happens if Navy has the Army-Navy game, which is after the American Championship? What if they win the American Championship? Then they go and Army beats them for some reason. Would it mess with bowl eligibility? That's what they wanted to know. And I don't know that, so if anybody does know that, they could comment here or on our Facebook page or Twitter or whatever else, that you can find.
It impacts Notre Dame at this point. Because Notre Dame beat Temple, but Temple losing to Tampa School didn't help Notre Dame's strength of schedule. So you could have Navy in that title game. But you know what? Navy and Houston, I believe, play in a couple of weeks. So that should be good. We talked about the number of carries that Navy had last week.
Yeah.
They had something like 403 yards and 7 touchdowns running.
That's crazy.
Can you imagine?
Crazy.
What an offensive display that must be.
55-14 over SMU. Wow. It's crazy.
Crazy.
I mean, they definitely play a different brand of football. So.
That they do. Houston rallies. So do the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah, that was awesome today. They keep talking every week. The announcers on TV and stuff just keep people rave about Blake. They do. They say that he makes the mistakes and stuff like that, but more and more they're talking about, how good of a quarterback he's going to be, and if he was just surrounded by the right players and all this stuff. So he's starting to get props. People are realizing how good of a player he is and not the team, But today they were able to pull it out.
And an important game for them to win. Moves them up to 3 wins, and then they're home Thursday night. Isn't this interesting now that the NFL is experimenting with this? You wear all the same colors, so he's going to be, as will be Jacksonville, all in gold. And they're in the Thursday night game on NFL Network, head-to-head with the UCF game.
Yeah. Well, it's not really gold if you've seen it. It's
a little mustard.
It's kind of like a baby poop, like brown.
It's hard to get gold.
Yellow. Oh, it's horrible.
It's hard to get gold into that fabric.
It's horrible.
Well,
it's absolutely
we've come a
horrible.
long way because it used to be a sea of black and yellow at UCF games.
Yeah.
The yellow would be masquerading as gold.
I mean, even the pants that we have would have been better than this color that they're, those gold pants or the gold jerseys or whatever. It's horrible. Horrible. I'm glad that I'll be at the ECU game and won't be watching that Jacksonville game.
You will not be recording that game?
I'll probably record it.
Yeah. A week ago, we told you former UCF offensive lineman Torian Wilson was an Orlando Predator. You get to see him locally. Changing plans. He has inked a deal on the practice squad with the New England Patriots, who just mere moments ago moved to undefeated.
Yeah,
stayed undefeated.
That's great for him. I wish that it was with a different team. I'm a Patriot hater for sure. But did you see my Chiefs tonight putting the whooping on Denver?
They don't win very often in Denver, do they?
It was awesome. I love it. I love it.
Should not go without mentioning that Kansas played a pretty good game with TCU.
Yeah.
But lost, and there remain 2 teams without a win, and they're your 2 favorite college football teams.
My 2 teams. It's absolutely amazing that, thank God for my Royals this year, or, and my Chiefs are starting to pick it up, or I might just be like suicidal at the, knocking on some hospital glass, like, let me out. Anyway, yeah.
Well, let's see what else is happening.
All right, time for news and notes. And now, news and notes from the world of UCF sports. Freshman women's soccer goalkeeper Vera Veras and senior midfielder Ashley Spivey were named to the American Athletic Conference All-Tournament team. Meantime, UCF senior midfielder Megan Fish has been selected as recipient of the Higher Achievement Award, which is presented to deserving student athletes for their accomplishments beyond sports.
Good for her. Women's basketball drops its opener, 75-60 at Nebraska-Omaha. Freshman Ashley Polisek with 22 points during her collegiate debut. Meantime, 2 local signees, one from Jones High, the other West Orange High, mark women's basketball's 4-person recruiting class. Up next, FIU comes to CFE Arena Tuesday night at 7 for UCF's home opener.
Senior men's soccer forward Haji Berry was selected to the American All-Conference first team. The Knights were also represented by a freshman defender Yakov Basic, who is a unanimous selection in the American All-Rookie team.
Cross country wraps up its season, 21st place finish at the NCAA South Regional in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
UCF volleyball falls 3-2 at UConn on Sunday, plus a 3-0 loss at Temple on Friday. Up next, the Knights return home for Parents' Night match with Memphis and Senior Night against Cincinnati on Sunday.
Softball concluded the fall season as Team Gold shut out Team Black 6-0 at the UCF softball complex.
And finally, Team Black beats Team Gold as rowing closed out the final slate at Lake Pickett during the annual Black and Gold Challenge.
I wonder if it's actual gold or that Blake Bortles mustard wear.
Yeah, it's like baby poop yellow. I don't know. Maybe they can come up with some better gold. It'd be nice.
Quite a bit going on for a bye week. Even more a week from now.
There is. Yep, we will be back doing that then. And then I got to talk a little bit about this thing that we're doing on December 13th. We're doing a live post-football season show on YouTube. It will be live on YouTube. You'll get to see our wonderful faces with Kyle Israel and special guest. We haven't figured out quite who it's going to be
We're going to
yet.
be talking about that 2-game winning streak to end the season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting, and that will be December 13th at 7:30 p.m.
Be there.
live on YouTube. You can go to our YouTube page and see it there. I think that's going to do it for episode number 60. I'm Andrew Phegley.
I'm Trace Trylko. Go Knights!
Charge on.
UCF, charge on to the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the line. Victory is our cry. BSETO or Y. Tonight our knights will shine.